Hello, this is Jeff Summit, Technical Director for Horico Golf. In this segment of our basic club making series, I want to explain how to properly abrade or sand the shaft tip for a good epoxy bond. You see, the paint and polyurethane on a graphite shaft or the chrome on a steel shaft is just going to be too slick for the epoxy to hold. Therefore, we need to roughen the surface to get a good bite for the epoxy to adhere to. I'm going to start out with the easier of the two, or the steel shaft. If we test fit the shaft into the head, we want to take note of how far it goes in. Now, I'm going to mark this with a Sharpie pen. And remember, I'm going to have a ferrule that's going to stick up above here. So I'm going to make sure I probably mark it about halfway up where the ferrule would go, and the rest will be hidden when I go through the rest of the assembly process. Next, I want to place the shaft in a vinyl shaft clamp and then into my vise to protect it. I want to make sure that my mark is about the edge of my shaft clamp so I don't abrade too far. I'm going to clamp it down. Then I'm going to take my sandpaper and I'm going to use a shoeshine method to remove the chrome plating. Now, I want to get this dull, so I'm going to use some force to break through the chrome. Occasionally, I'm going to have to loosen and rotate so it's nice and even across all 360 degrees of the shaft. And when I'm done, it should look like this. Now, if I had a belt sander, we could speed up this process much quicker, but if we were to abrade a graphite shaft tip, we would need a special belt for that. Now let's abrade the graphite shaft. Now, due to the added paint and polyurethane on the shaft tip, it's not going to easily insert into the hosel. Therefore, I'm going to need something to tell me how deep it is. In this case, I'm just going to take like a little 6-inch ruler, or I could take something small as long as I go to the sidewall to give me that mark. Once I find out how much it is, then I can make that mark on the shaft tip. Again, we want to sand just a bit higher than the top of the hosel, but not far enough that the ferrule's not going to cover it up. So I can either mark it with my Sharpie pen, and this is a black shaft so it's going to be hard to see, or I could take my vinyl shaft clamp and measure my mark, and then I can clamp it in my vise in that position. Now, a graphite shaft isn't as hard as a steel shaft. Therefore, I don't need as coarse of a grit of sandpaper or requires much pressure to remove the finish. But we're going to use the same method as we used with the steel shaft before. We basically want to use a shoeshine method and just light pressure to remove the paint and polyurethane. Occasionally, we're going to want to rotate the shaft and continue till we've got 360 degrees around. We can occasionally test fit and see if the shaft fits in there. If it does, then we probably don't need to go any further. In this case, I still have a little bit of paint to remove, and I'm going to continue doing that until I'm down to the bare graphite shaft. This is what it should look like when you're done. Now, we want to periodically test fit it, make sure it fits in, so we still have room for the epoxy. If we had a belt sander, we could speed up the process, but that's going to require a special belt not to abrade too much of the material off.